Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us for Weird Realities, Murders, Mysteries, and Mayhem. Tonight, you've got me, Morgana Calder, with Mr. Scott Baker, and we're going to be talking about Rasputin and Ben Franklin's serial killer. Scott, I'm going to let you start.
All right, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight. I mean, we got two great topics. Ben Franklin, the serial killer, which I'm really leading you on with that one, but it's actually a fascinating story in so many aspects. Yeah. Hello. Hi, Saldana. And we've also got one of the most fascinating, to me at least, one of the most fascinating figures in history who lived in one of the most bizarre and fascinating times. Rasputin, the Mad Monk. Morgana, can I go off on a brief history?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay. For those of you that don't know, and there are two fantastic movies out there, which I didn't know about until I started researching this. Rasputin with Christopher Lee as the Mad Monk, and another Rasputin with Alan Rickman. I was so excited to see Alan Rickman playing a Mad Monk, but he plays great bad guys.
He does.
But, Rasputin was should have been an insignificant character. He was born, pardon me while I refer to my notes, he was born in 1869 in the middle of Siberia to a peasant farmer. Nothing significant about him, his family. The only thing about Rasputin was he seemed to have these weird abilities. He saw visions. He was able to heal cows. He claimed that angels came to him in his dreams. He knew secrets about some of the locals that there was no way he really could have known how. But rather than, you're a young kid living in Siberia, he was a hellion. Partly because he was pampered. There were 7 children in the family before him. He was the 8th. All 7 siblings born before him either died at birth or shortly after. He was, at the age of 28, he married this young woman in the community. They had 4 kids together. He had mistresses. He was an alcoholic. One night he stole a horse. The police, being a horse thief in Siberia was a very bad offense. And he retreated and found sanctuary in a monastery. The monastery was the thing that changed his life. And I'm going to try, I'm a history teacher, so I'm going to try not to ramble. But the head of the monastery used to be the religious advisor to Tsar Nicholas II. And he brought Rasputin in. It was a sect of the Russian Orthodox Church called Kilsties. And they were a very weird sect. But if you're going to go religious, you got to go this way. Because what they did was they would have, their whole idea was to purge your sins with sins. They would asphyxiate themselves to the point of death. They would get drunk and dance around until they were completely exhausted, the men and the women. And then when they collapsed, they'd huff a couple of times and then have sex with the person, whoever they fell beside. The idea being to purge sin through sin. And he became devoted to this. He wound up going on, I think, a 2 or 3 year journey throughout the region. There were claims he made it as far as Greece, as far south as Greece, as far north as Finland. He didn't wash for years. He wore shackles around his legs to enhance the pain and to increase his suffering. And then what happened was, when the monk of his church got sick, retired, and came back, he needed somebody to replace him as the religious advisor to Tsar Peter. No, Tsar Nicholas, I'm sorry. Tsar Nicholas in St. Petersburg. And they sent out Rasputin. And Rasputin was ideal for the situation. I mean, at that time, Moscow was just a den of sin. I mean, everybody was sleeping with everybody else. The regime was falling apart. And he wound up becoming friends with two members of the royal family, Princess Milika and Princess Anastasia of Montenegro. They were despised. They were the only non-Russian members of the royal family. So they were shunned by everyone. And when this guy came along, they fell in with him. They became good friends. I'm sure they became part of the religious activities. And eventually, through the two princesses, they got him in to see the Tsarina of Russia. And she needed a spiritual advisor, and she fell for this guy. She believed her. And I do believe he had the ability to do some healing. There's been no proof that he hasn't, that he did know certain things. But what cemented his relationship was that the Tsar and Tsarina had no male heirs. And then a boy was born, Alexander. He was a hemophiliac, but they were keeping that quiet. Nobody knew about it except the inner workings. And one day Rasputin comes pounding in and says, "Your son is hemophiliac. I can cure him." And that floored the Tsarina. Of course, it couldn't have been the fact that, he got that information from the two despised princesses. But he went in, threw all the doctors out, and the child recovered. Now, a lot of people think it's because Rasputin threw them all out and they stopped giving him aspirin, which was making him bleed even more. Either case, he became like the right-hand man to the Tsar. He actually almost became the Tsar. I mean, when the war broke out and Tsar Nicholas went off to the front, the Tsarina she practically made him the head of the government. He appointed like four foreign, I think he appointed 4 secretaries of state, 4 prime ministers, 4 ministers of war, and 6 interior ministers. He had control over the royal family. And the longer he was there, the more they listened to him and the more entrenched in power he came. And there were plots to get rid of them. There were 2 priests that tried to get rid of him. They actually beat him up because he was involved in sex acts all over Russia. They had the police following him. He used to take hookers into the bathhouses, and rather than do what you usually do in a Russian bathhouse, he'd beat them severely, and then to beat the sin out of them, and then F the sin out of them. He was kept an eye on. Like I said, the 2 priests tried to get rid of him from the Russian Orthodox Church. They beat him up. He informed the Tsarina. One of them got exiled to Siberia. The other one dressed as a woman and ran away to Finland. He had a heavily deformed prostitute go to Siberia and knife Rasputin a couple of times in the chest, and she even ripped out his intestines before she was stopped. I know this story seems bizarre. This is history. Then World War I came. Rasputin recovered, went back to Russia, but now the older he got, the less his abilities. He couldn't foresee the future anymore. His healing abilities started to dry up, and because of his involvement in politics, and he was not putting in good prime ministers, ministers of war. He was putting in friends and cronies. The people in Russia, the people within the royal family and the Russian government were getting tired of him. Now comes the most interesting part of the story. One of the royal family members was Felix. Yes, Felix Yusuf. Felix Yusuf was a nephew of the Tsarina. He was one of those that did not like what was going on and felt that they had to get rid of Rasputin. And there was no way that they were going to talk him out of it. There was no way that they were going to, scare him off. The two priests weren't able to. There was no way they were going to talk the Tsarina out of this. She was devoted and dedicated to him. So they came up with this plot. Yusupov was married to another member of the royal family, Irina. He was at least bisexual, probably homosexual. So Irina was off having her own affairs to be happy. It was a fine relationship. So him and a couple of his cohorts called Rasputin and said, Irina's gone nuts. She's a sex addict. She's running around. You've got to cure her. She's going to bring a bad name to the royal family. He shows up one night. Little did he know. He shows up, and they say, Yusupov and his two cohorts meet him and say, oh, Irina's upstairs. He shows up. They bring him to the basement. There's this big table with all sorts of food and drinks on it. And he says, Yusupov says, we just had a party. Don't worry about it. She's upstairs. Come on, stay down here for a few minutes. She'll be down in a minute. So Yusupov starts handing him these little tea cakes and glasses of wine laced with cyanide. 2.5 hours later, Rasputin is still there, plopping the cakes, drinking the wine, and Yusupov goes upstairs to talk to the co-conspirators like, I don't know what's going on. This guy's eaten 2 hours worth of cyanide and is still standing. What are we going to do? So one of the co-conspirators takes his revolver, gives it to Yusupov and says, kill him. Yusupov goes downstairs, aims the gun. Rasputin looks him in the eye. Boom, a shot to the chest. The Rasputin goes down. So Yusupov goes upstairs, and the three of them are drinking and celebrating. We got rid of Rasputin. And then Yusupov gets this bad feeling. Goes downstairs. There's the body. He goes over, shakes the body. The eyes open up. Rasputin, I'm telling the Tsarina. He runs out of the house. Yusupov goes upstairs, brings the others down. He's crawling up the stairs. He hits the yard. He's running, screaming. They go out. 2 more shots. One to the back, one to the head. One of the co-conspirators grabs a metal pipe and starts beating him over the head. Finally, boom, he drops dead, supposedly. They throw him in the bag, drive him to a river, punch him through the ice, and the body floats away. Couple of days, they're thinking, it'll go out to the Baltic Sea. Nobody will ever know. Couple of days later, they find the body. Now, hang on a sec. I can't post it. I've got a photograph. I'll post it on Weird Realities. When they found the body was, the hands were up like this. He had frozen as if he was trying to dig his way out from under the ice. So Rasputin is dead. They've gotten rid of him. The funny thing was, shortly before he died, Rasputin had written a letter to to the Tsarina, saying, my time is limited. I know I don't have much time left. I'm going to be killed. If I'm killed by a normal Russian citizen, that's fine. But if I'm killed by a member of the royal family, your bloodline will not see 2 more years before it died. He was executed. He was murdered 30th December, 1916. Less than a year later, the revolution took place. Less than a year after that, the entire royal family was executed by the communists.
Yes. Yes, they were. He is a very intriguing figure.
I hope.
He is also a very strange figure.
Yes.
Hey, Mark.
Hey, Mark.
Because I know that was one of the big things that a lot of the people of the courts hated about him. Hey, Alan. Because he was unkempt. He was downright dirty a lot of the times. Yes. He would go in there and he'd have food from days ago in his beard, and he hadn't taken a bath. He made the comment in the middle of, the uppers that he hadn't changed his underwear in 6 months.
Yeah.
So they thought he was beneath them.
Yeah.
And then for her to have put him so highly on a pedestal was almost an insult, to the royal family and everything. They said that he had just the most penetrating blue eyes. So the women of the court were really drawn to him because, just that stare. They said, it was very difficult to hold his gaze for any length of time, and that he did know things, that he should not have known. So I believe he had some.
M.I. Alan.
Thanks, Alan. Now I'll see you and think that every time. So, they would go in, with this whole attitude of, different groups of people are supposed to stay within their own realm. He was not to mingle with his higher ups, and he didn't have a problem with that. So they had a huge problem with him.
And I mean, everything I've read, I studied that period of history. Everything I've read, everything I know, he was not a charlatan.
No.
He did have the abilities. Yes. Now, maybe, he manipulated. I mean, he manipulated his way to the top. But partly because of that innate attraction that he brought to people, and I think partly because he had the ability to heal and to do good. But the one part of the story, I did some research on this, was the most fascinating part, the one that's made the movies great, the one that everybody knows, his death may actually be a lie.
Right.
Because,
his autopsy, they had an autopsy,
yeah.
And when Lenin was in office or was in power, they disappeared, and
right.
So, like I said, so there, that part of it, you'll never be able to look at and say, oh, well, this is what happens, because you just don't know.
Yeah. The only information that the little tidbit that they got, that somebody got from the autopsy, said that that he was shot in the head at close range. They never mentioned poison.
Right.
And Rasputin's daughter, Maria, who fled Russia after the revolution and became a circus lion tamer, billed as the daughter of the famous Mad Monk whose feats in Russia astonished the world,
yes.
She disagrees with Yusupov's claims, saying that her father did not like sweets, and she doubted that he would sit there for 2.5 hours drinking wine and eating cakes.
Right.
And really, the only account of Rasputin's death comes from Yusupov's diaries.
Yes.
And you have to wonder to yourself, hi, come on over, bang, you're dead. You're the bad guy. But, but if you're, feeding the devil cake and wine and he won't die and you got to shoot him 2 or 3 times and drown him in the river, you become the martyr. You become the hero.
Right. Well, and that's the thing too with because there were so many rumors that went around. I mean, for the longest time, people were selling an amputated penis as the one that they cut off during all of this. It was actually used as a holy relic for a while. Yeah. And it's just one of those things, like I said, because I did several reports and a couple of speeches on him when I was in high school and college. And it's just amazing the things that come out, when there's mystery surrounding it. Some guy, paid $8,000 for this relic to find out, oh no, he was still intact, probably very well diseased because of his lavish lifestyle, but no, we don't think you have the real deal there. So
be nice to your wife, or it might be.
There you go.
But isn't there supposedly isn't his member supposedly on display now at the St. Petersburg Museum?
It's controversial whether or not it is, because of the autopsy that was missing.
Yeah.
Because some people say the autopsy kills that theory and some say that it doesn't, but nobody knows. It's in the Vatican Library with all that other hidden stuff.
Oh, it's in the Vatican Library.
Yeah, that's where everybody sends all of their secret stuff to. So, but Edie Bobbitt, yeah, you know. But so like I said, you know, there are some, you know, stories for both sides of that, you know, and the thing is too, with, like I said, him being able to get in, you know, with the royal family as close as he did, if he had not helped that child, he'd have never gotten in that close.
No,
you know? I mean, because that was their life. I mean, as much as they loved their girls, and from all accounts, theirs was a love match.
yes.
You know, Nicholas and Alexandra's, but they were still disappointed that their first 4 children were girls. And then they finally have Alexei, and he has, you know, the Queen Victoria disease. You know, she mothered the majority of Europe. But so the odds of him living during that time, you know, to have had it so as badly as he had it, you know, to have had such an extreme case of it was unusual in and of itself. So he really had to have made a difference. Now, maybe he got lucky and Alexei was coming to, you know, a better place, but still the timing, you know, just is crazy, because from all accounts, he actually cured him. Mm-hmm. You know, quit having the bleeding episodes and everything. And they said that he had it so badly that they wouldn't give him the morphine and stuff because of his age, and that the only relief he got when he would have those outbreaks was passing out. You know, so someone comes along and takes all of that away from your child. Of course, you're going to, you know, welcome them wholeheartedly into your family. And, you know, all of the mystery surrounding him. I mean, how many years was it before we even verified that Anastasia and Alexei were killed?
Right.
You know, I mean, so like I said, yeah, I think there's a lot more out there that we don't know and probably never will. But he's definitely always been one of my most interesting characters in history. I love that time period, not the revolution so much, but you know, when Fabergé was out, I remember the first time I ever saw, you know, a picture of a Fabergé egg. I was probably in about 6th, 7th grade. So that history, that's how long I've been looking at that part of, you know, the world's history and everything. So
and Rasputin, under any other circumstance or any other regime, Rasputin would have been a footnote.
Yes.
But St. Petersburg, it was like he walked into his own realm.
Yes.
The decadence, the paranoia, just the whole mindset. He fit right in perfectly. He just walked in, made friends, took control. I mean, what was that? I can't remember her name, but there was like that one noble woman that, like, you know, fell so madly in love with him and became so endeared by his skills. She like divorced her husband, exiled her kids, and you know, I
cannot remember who I know who you're talking about. I can't remember the name.
Yeah, and was seen like holding his member in public, you know, praising it.
Yeah. I mean, so like I said, and the thing is, I completely 100% do not think that he and the Tsarina ever had a sexual relationship. No. I don't, you know, and that's part of, you know, they tried to use that to get them out to begin with, which, you know, that because they hated her because she was German and it was during World War I, you know, and that just made it that much worse. So, I mean, they were doing any and everything they could to discredit her. But
what about the rumors that he was having fun with some of the royal daughters?
That one, I would not at all be surprised, because they were younger and they were basically under his control. Him being, you know, the advisor to their father, you know, being the on-site, you know, holy person. They would have been told to trust him and to do as he said. So I think he had yes, I believe he could very easily have done that. You know, I do not think there was anything pure about Rasputin. You know, there wasn't, you know, and the thing is, he truly believed that that's how you got to heaven, you know, by sending the sin out of yourself and everything. So what worse sin than a young girl?
Yeah.
You know, I mean, so I could see that.
And didn't the nanny like try to get him banned from the daughter's quarters?
Yes.
And then and then the Tsarina fired him.
Yes, sure did. And like I said, that was they were very protective of him because, people would come to them with, his insanity, like, the way he was treating the prostitutes and stuff like that. When people come complain to you about the way a prostitute is treated, that's pretty bad, that they haven't always been the most well taken care of, group. But they ignored it. Because like I said, he had saved their son. So, he pretty much had carte blanche to do whatever he wanted to do. And if one of the daughters had come to them and said, hey, this has happened, I think they'd have taken it more seriously.
Right.
But I don't think anybody ever came to them and said, this is happening, because they feared how much influence he had over her.
Or maybe the daughters were willingly.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Whatever happened to Rasputin's body?
I know it was dug up at one point and thrown into a fire.
Oh, that's right.
Because they said it looked like he was sitting upright when he was burning. Yeah.
Yes, so, I remember that's when they did the making a holy relic.
Yes, exactly. And that's the thing too that kind of makes the autopsy iffy, because like I said, supposedly that happened when they dug him up to burn him. So it's possible that is him that's being displayed in the museum, but I think it was not like 4 or 5 years afterwards, when the Bolsheviks had pretty much taken over, I think was when they dug him up and burned him, because he was, the Antichrist. But according to him, he was the little Christ. Because there was one instance where someone had questioned him about something. I forget exactly what the context of the conversation was, but he referred to himself as the little Christ, or I'm going to have to look it up. It's going to drive me crazy.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think he was a charlatan. I think he was, like you said, a true believer in the absurdity he believed in.
Yes. It's kind of like a compulsive liar. They believe every word they're telling you. Yeah. I think he was compulsive in his beliefs. I really think that, he wasn't about just going around having sex with any or everybody, but that he felt that was his way to salvation, because I know a part of that sect too believed that, like Christ, when he was born, as the Son of God, that this happened on a more regular basis, that Jesus Christ was not the only reincarnation of God that was in the world at one time. They were a very, controversial sect, especially for that time. But the church never tried to get rid of them. So, you kind of have to wonder how much of it they were okay with.
Now, my question would be, because you know more about this, that sect of the Russian Orthodox religion, the Kilsties, were they mostly out in Siberia, so nobody gave a crap? Or was there a large influence in and around Russia, St. Petersburg, Moscow?
Well, I don't think it was so much that they were so far away. I just don't think that it was a huge group. Okay. I think that it was small enough that, they just didn't bring a lot of attention to themselves. I think he was probably the first one that went crazy enough to, publicly, go out and say, hey, this is what we believe and this is what I'm doing. But, they felt like they were more of a secret brotherhood, that inner working, that only the select few got to learn that kind of thing. And maybe that was how it worked. Because that's what it was. They taught that there was an ever renewing reincarnation of God in man, that this could happen on earth anywhere and at any time. The birth at Nazareth, where God became man, was not an isolated event, but was constantly being repeated. And that started becoming an issue within the church, because, that would make, Christ just a normal person like everyone else. Right. When you didn't teach that and everything. So that's when they started, I think, going more into themselves, and kind of trying to keep out of the limelight. But they had banned sexual intercourse in marriage at one point, and because that was a sin. But if you were married and went out and sinned with another woman, then that was, sinning the sin away.
Yeah.
Which
I love that. Sinning the sin away.
Yeah,
Don't think my wife would buy that if I tried that today.
Right, but I think that's hilarious. You can't touch your wife. You'll go to hell for that.
Yeah.
But so yeah, I think that that's when the church, the priests got involved with trying to, when it started becoming known that this was an Orthodox part of the church, but people weren't supposed to know about it.
And the ironic thing is, his name is known in history better than almost anyone else, except maybe Tsar Nicholas II himself.
Yes.
They've made 3 movies about him, one with Christopher Lee, one with Alan Rickman. There was one, I think, made in 1932 in Germany. I can't remember. That would be fun to watch.
I am going to have to watch the Rickman one because I did not know that existed.
I didn't either. I discovered it. I found a link on YouTube to the death scene. And I wanted to watch the death scene and play it out. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, I know the voice of that monk, of Rasputin. And then all of a sudden they did a close-up and I was like, oh my God, it's Al. I get the link. I'll send it to you.
Okay, awesome. Great.
Alan Rickman as Rasputin. It's almost, that's even better than Alan Rickman as Hans
Snake
Gruber.
Hans
Gruber.
Yes. Yeah, that's the first thing I remember seeing him in. And he's always been one of my favorite bad guys, even though I love him as a good guy too, but just it's perfect for him. So yes, I think that would be interesting to see him play that role.
Yeah.
And everything.
So moving away from historical truth, let's delve into some historical speculation.
Yes.
Do you want me to do the Ben Franklin opening, or do you want to?
Go right ahead.
Okay. Benjamin Franklin. Okay. Serial killer? The question arose, ironically, as they were trying to pay tribute to Benjamin Franklin. He lived for almost 20 years. He lived in London from 1757 to 1775 before he came home to become part of the American Revolution. He lived at a four-story Georgian house at 36 Craven Street near the Thames. And back in 1997, they wanted to, the house had been purchased by the Benjamin Franklin Historical Society, and they were going to renovate it and turn it into a museum. So they bring in the contractors and they're renovating the basement, and lo and behold, they dig up a human thigh bone. So immediately they have to stop. They call the police come in, and they find over 1,000 bones buried in a pit in the basement, like a meter square, down in where Benjamin Franklin lived. Could have been anybody. The house has been there for 300 years. So they did forensics on it, and they determined that the bones were placed there. They came from the time period when Benjamin Franklin lived at 36 Craven Street.
I love that street.
Yes. Craven. It reminds me of the vampire from Underworld. Now, I'm waiting for somebody to turn around and say, I was waiting to do this. I'm reading through this show. Benjamin Franklin is Jack the Ripper. But
yes.
Even though that was 100 years later. It turns out that, and it's not really a mystery, because as they did the research on it, they found out, but this is still a fascinating part of history. Benjamin Franklin was friends with a young doctor to whom he sublet an apartment. The doctor was William Hewson. He was oh my God, I can't read without my glasses. He was an anatomical professor. He was studying the human body.
He was actually considered the father of hematology.
Yes. Yeah, he was a brilliant doctor. I mean, when he was at the oh God, I gotta bring my glasses, and I don't like to because that makes me look old. He was at one of the prestigious universities, medical universities in London. And the first thing he did that garnered attention, he ran mercury through the lymphic system of a turtle to show how the blood flows. And everybody was so impressed with him that two particular doctors, the Hunts brothers, brought him on board. And they were working together. And he made some astonishing finds, which we'll talk about later. The problem was, and this is the part of history that's fascinating, is back then it was illegal to do dissection on human bodies. Even up into the 1770s in London, you couldn't do it. The only bodies that you could dissect were criminals who were put to death by the state. And if London had said, for whatever crime you committed, you're executed, the minute you were executed, your body was immediate. It was even written into the law that your body would be sent off and it would be used for dissection, which for doctors was phenomenal. I mean, finally, they have a chance to actually work on a human body. Students would fill the auditoriums to where you couldn't even get in. The downside was there weren't a lot of criminals being executed, so there weren't a lot of bodies being dissected. So in comes the darker side of modern science. Grave robbers, or as they like to call themselves, resurrectionists. These people would go out, they would dig up fresh bodies, remind you of a certain Mary Wollstonecraft Shelley character, and they would sell them to doctors so the doctors could illegally but covertly perform their dissections and learn from them. It is pretty much believed that Husin was dealing with resurrectionists. They found in total, when they went through and they dug up all the bodies and did the forensic, and I've gotten two different, they found anywhere from 15 to the bones of 15 to 28 people, from infants to adults, both sexes. Yeah. All of them showed signs of medical procedures. There was one, I think it was a thigh bone, that was sliced through perfectly with a
scalpel.
Scalpel, thank you. I'm not getting old. No, I'm not. They found skulls with the holes drilled through the head, which was the procedure back then for releasing pressure from the brain. They believed that he was bringing the bodies in because he was living in the house. It's a 4-story house. You can pretty much do what you want in a 4-story house. And that when he was done with the bodies, you can't leave them in the trash can or that. So he was burying them in the basement. Now, was that okay? Was, grave robbing? Well, he's not actually robbing the graves. He's just using the bodies.
Because he was paying for the bodies.
Huh?
He was paying
for the bodies, yes, And granted, they were bodies of normal people. They weren't killed for their crimes. That's up to you to decide. But as Morgana said, he was one of the first leading hematologists. Husin observed the lymphatic production in the spleen. He was the first doctor to describe the breakdown of blood into 3 cells, red, white, plasma. He was the first doctor to determine that the red blood cells are actually little discs, not liquid. Let's see. He had done a lot of phenomenal research. I mean, research doctors rely on today. And ironically, he died in 1774 of blood sepsis he was performing a dissection, cut himself, his blood got infected, and he died of wounds. So.
Yep. Yep.
Now, for the Ben Franklin serial killer part, no evidence exists that Ben Franklin ever got involved in these activities. I doubt it, because personally, Ben Franklin in London, he was Rasputin himself around the court. So he was having a good time. Did he know about it? I think so.
Yeah.
I mean, how could you not? But being Ben Franklin, being of his mindset, I'm sure he just turned his back with a grin and let science take its course.
Yeah. I think he knew. I think they may have even had conversations about it. I don't necessarily think he was involved, because that wasn't his area of interest. But, he was the type that would encourage someone like Houston to, find what he could find. So I think he definitely knew about it. I don't necessarily think he was standing next to him, handing him the scalpel or anything like that. But yeah, I mean, Ben Franklin, by all accounts, was very curious. So I can't imagine him, not asking questions or encouraging, him to talk about what he was doing and everything. But yeah, it was a fun thing. I mean, I found out a lot of stuff, like the fact that he was considered the father of hematology. Mm-hmm. Did not know that. Actually, until Hadley brought up this particular subject, the whole concept of Ben Franklin as a serial killer, I had totally missed. Okay. Not sure what I had going on in 98, but obviously it was not Franklin. But so I mean, it was a fascinating thing to research, because when you start out, you're looking, oh, wait a minute, Ben Franklin had bodies in his house. But then when you start digging into it and start getting the rest of it, I mean, of all the things that Houston found, I'm that person. When I'm gone, do what you need to with my body if it'll help somebody else.
Exactly.
But I know not everyone feels that way. So, to each his own. But, if it weren't for the Resurrectionists, we wouldn't know nearly what we do now.
No.
Because they did give those young doctors a way to do the research. Because, for every one convict that was, cut open, you had 2,000 medical students that were trying to learn something from it. So, where there is a demand, somebody's going to come up with a supply. So, it was one of those things, they even had people that would hire guards to guard their loved ones' graves, during this time period, for so long till the body wasn't good for research anymore. So they would hire somebody to stand over the grave for, a week. But who's to say they weren't part of, because how are you going to know?
Yeah.
I mean, so, oh no, nobody's been here. We've been here.
Yes, I won't let them dig up your relative's body. Hey, how much dig up the relative's body?
That's right. There you go. So I think there was probably a lot of that going on back then too. And I know there were your regular, grave robbers that were doing it for, jewelry and stuff like that. But, they opened up a field that was necessary for that time.
Side note on this, there is a fantastic movie from 1985 with Timothy Dalton, The Doctor and the Devils, that goes into this whole realm of resurrectionism. It's based on the case, I can't remember, it's like Butch and Hare or something, 2 grave robbers that got to the point they thought, like, why dig up bodies? That takes so much time. We can just kill people on the street. They're fresher. Uh-huh. And these 2 were actually murdering lower class citizens, hookers, people that wouldn't be missed, and dropping the body off at Timothy Dalton's house as the doctor.
Mhm.
And it's a fascinating movie. It really historically accurately it's not historically accurate to the event, but it really details what it was like to be a doctor, what it was like to be a grave robber, the whole conundrum that existed in 1770s English medical science.
Right. Well, and there's a lot to be said for the fact that it could be historically accurate.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, supply and demand,
Yeah.
a lot. And, it kind of makes you think of this as a totally different subject down a different rabbit hole, but Jack the Ripper, that time
Mhm.
period, it has been, speculated that this person had surgical, precision with a lot of these wounds and stuff. So who's to say that some of that wasn't botched, somebody trying to get that body they needed to experiment on.
With Jack the Ripper, I tend to go, and if anybody wants to chat with me about this, go to my Facebook page.
Mhm.
Go to my Facebook page, message me. I tend to go more towards the theory proposed by the Johnny Depp movie From Hell. I think it was, if not the doctor to the royal family, a well-placed doctor within London community.
Mm-hmm.
But again, there's 1,000 reasons why I think that. So,
oh yeah, there are so many ways that could go, and like I said, and that is a totally different subject. It falls in with that. The same thing with the people taking the bodies instead of digging up the bodies, because that's a lot of work.
Yeah.
Having to dig it up, having to cover it back up, and make it look like it hasn't been touched. Like you can just grab somebody off the street that nobody's going to miss, and
yeah, and I mean, how long does it? Because as you're digging up and reburying the gravesite, you could get caught. That's a couple of hours.
Exactly.
Just somebody walks by, bunk, drag them away.
That's right. There you go. And like I say, that's about as fresh as it gets.
Yeah.
It's not for me. I mean, I'm not squeamish. I dissected my frog in high school and the kitty cat in college. I mean, that's fine. But I really don't want to be cutting into people. That's not my thing.
I took earth science and geology, so I didn't have to cut anything open.
Well,
I took astronomy, but my father misunderstood. He thought I took up space in school. So.
I took astronomy, one of my favorite classes, except for math.
Yeah.
I'm dyslexic, so math is not my friend, but the rest of it I absolutely loved. Yeah. So, and I was thankful enough to have a professor that saw how much I enjoyed the rest of it, and he curved my math grade. Mm-hmm. So,
and I mean, I shouldn't say ironic. The thing about the whole bodies in Benjamin Franklin's basement, they're now on display at the museum in London.
Yes.
They're accepted as part of
medical history,
science moving forward. So
right. And anatomy was so much in its infancy in that time period.
Yeah.
There was so much that they didn't know about the human body and everything. So like I said, yeah, it was a really good one to delve into. I enjoyed it. And now you've got me thinking about From Hell. I haven't seen that probably since it came out, and I'm going to have to go rewatch it. But I liked this one. I really did. Like I said, because in no way, form, or fashion would I ever think that Ben Franklin was a serial killer. But then, I probably am surrounded by 3 or 4 at all times and just don't know it.
I would never kill you, Morgan. Oh, I'm sorry.
Hey, but I have done a lot of research on body disposal. Mm-hmm. So if you ever need ideas, just holler at me.
Oh, body, please. I was in Florida. We had 1,000 alligator farms.
Yeah, I know.
Or up here in New England, just find a pig farm.
Yep. Well, a friend of mine back years ago when we first met, the subject came up, and I'm like, well, so far I've come up with about 11 ways that I can do without getting caught. And he goes, we're going to be friends. And I'm like, okay, why do you think that? He goes, I can make it 12. I'm like, okay, give it to me. He goes, shark shit. I'm like, what? He goes, out in the boat, slashed that femoral artery. Shark shit doesn't have DNA. And I'm like, oh my God, I never thought of that one. You live right off the Gulf. All you have to do is take a boat trip out.
Well, I have always been a firm believer that an intelligent person can get away with murder once.
Yes.
If they think it through.
Yes.
Because it's so hard to... Now, there's a shitload of stupid people out there that are committing murder right and left. Oh God, I can't think of the guy in Boston who murdered his pregnant wife. It originally started as it was like a gang member shot her, him and her. She died, he didn't. Charles Stewart. Mm-hmm. Charles Stewart. Read up on that one. That guy was as dumb as a box of Oreos. He almost got away with it and then blew the whole thing.
Some people are really, really, really... Okay, side story. A guy I grew up with, our parents were best friends, broke into a bar after hours, stole guns, because, this was in a rough neighborhood, so they confiscated weapons at the door. So he stole guns, he got money and all this other stuff, got out, only got picked up because he was caught with something he took out of the bar. So my dad goes with his friend to get his son out. He's underage at the time. So he's like, okay, we can let him loose, to you as his parent. He said, but the thing is, he goes, I'm going to be honest with you. He goes, we don't have enough to hold him over. He goes, what do you mean? There is no way he could have broken into there and gotten out. There is no way that there's nothing showing a break-in. The cameras show nothing. I mean, this whole thing. So my dad say, okay, just sit here until we go fill out this paperwork. Shut your mouth. Don't say a word. So, of course, the detective comes in and says, yeah, well, you can talk all you want to. We know you didn't do it. There's no way you could have. And egged him into showing him how the hell he broke in. So that 2 years in juvie, he earned. I mean...
We used to have in Boston the Stupid Criminal of the Year award.
Uh-huh.
And one of my favorites were these two teenage kids that had mugged an 80-year-old woman. Mm-hmm. So they were caught, the whole thing goes to court. The prosecution stands up there, the 80-year-old woman's in the stand, and he goes, are the two men who mugged you in court today? And they went,
oh, gosh. That's insane.
What do you do when you're the defense at that point?
Yeah. Have you seen the movie Murder by Numbers with Sandra Bullock?
No.
That's a really good one because it's a couple of teenage boys decide that they can commit the perfect murder. And it's really good. It's a young Ryan Gosling and Sandra Bullock, and it was very interesting the way that they played it out and everything because I didn't think that way at that age. So I'd have gotten caught at that age if I'd have killed somebody, most likely.
Probably, yeah.
But all right. Well, I think we've said about all we can say about Mr. Franklin. But
yes.
We agree he is not a serial killer.
Yeah. And Rasputin, one of the most interesting figures in Russian history.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, he is.
Yeah.
If you get the chance, definitely do some research on him because he's very fascinating.
Yeah.
So, all right, friends. Well, make sure you give us a like, give us a follow. If there's something that you would like to hear us talk about, let us know. Let us know what we're doing good. And until next time, stay weird.
Bye.
Bye.